Hello, and welcome to another episode of Smells Like Identity Hygiene, the podcast that's all about identity and security. I am your host, Rosario Mastrogiacomo, and today I have a very special guest, Angie Woodruff. Angie is the Director of Identity Management at JetBlue. And Angie, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Can we start, Angie? Can you tell us a little bit about your role and a little bit of history of how you got here?
My current role is Director of Identity Access Management, Governance, and Compliance at JetBlue. I started off as a quality assurance tester years ago and have since transitioned up the ladder, and within the last 3 years, transitioned into cybersecurity 100%. So prior to my full commitment in the cyberspace, I actually did support the cybersecurity team from an audit and PMO perspective. And so that helped with additional training to make the transition.
And when you transitioned over to security and identity, was that all within JetBlue? Because I saw
Yes,
that you had some experience back in finance,
right.
but JetBlue was all security. So what made you? Was it the kind of thing where an opportunity opened up in the security space and the IAM space, or it was more like you were really interested in it and kind of were pulled into it?
A combination of both. So I would say about maybe 6 years ago, cybersecurity started to pique my interest. Having had the majority of my experience in the testing side of the house or technology side of the house, um, I started taking some courses both internally and on my own. And then there was a transition of leadership in the cybersecurity space, and I requested that if there were any opportunities to be considered. And the opportunity came about a few months afterwards, and here I am.
So it's really interesting, kind of the if you the your career from QA to then kind of having the interest in identity and security, and really when we talk about security these days, you have to talk about identity, right? There used to be a time where there were two separate things, and that world is kind of now changed. In the way that you think about obviously QA and identity management and security are two completely different things. But did you see things in when you were in finance and then transitioning to aviation? Do you see things that are similar in kind of the two industries? Are they completely different, or was it the kind of thing where your role was so different that it's hard to kind of look at the two or make
No,
a
I would
comparison of the
say
two?
there's a there's a lot of things where there's synergies, but yet they're still different. So from a regulatory compliance perspective on the finance side of the house, there's extreme amount of regulations that has to be adhered to. But within the cyberspace, as I mentioned, one of my responsibilities is governance and compliance, and the under the compliance umbrella, that does include a lot of the regulatory forms. So FAA, TSA, PCI, of course, and the list goes on and on. So from that perspective, there was a lot of synergies. I think the training, if you will, or the fundamentals of the roles transition, which I think has also helped me to make the transition and embrace identity a lot easier from the sense of, being a tester, you got to pay attention to detail, you got to be inquisitive, you got to raise questions, you got to understand the SDLC. And so in transitioning over to cyber, it's now just adding to where does cyber fit into all of that, the full delivery model. So for me, it wasn't a complicated change, and I do see the synergies. Um, Yet between finance, aviation, at its core, it's different, but cybersecurity transitions the same, if you will, right? You still have to be alert for who has access to what. You want to make sure the right people have access to the right information when they need it. That doesn't change. I think that transcends all of the different industries.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like in both cases you're trying to break it, right? If you're QA, you're trying to break the application. If
Yes.
you're in security, you're trying to break all the things that you put in place to protect the environment.
Right. You want to find the holes before your
Yeah.
friendly criminals do.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. It's almost like I mean, it is. If you're QA, you're a pen tester, right? You're trying to find the holes. You're trying to break it. You're trying to. I guess that the difference is from a security perspective, it's live, right? You're
Right.
doing it with you're trying to protect a live environment, whereas in QA, it's prior to it
Yes.
going
Test.
into
Exactly.
production. So let's talk a little bit about identity and identity security. Of course, this is a podcast about identity security. Would you say there was a time where you recognized, everyone talks about identity being the new perimeter, right? Can you think of as you were transitioning into a security role, into an IAM role, where you really it kind of opened your eyes? Was there a time where it really opened your eyes, like, oh wow, identity is security. It's not about just firewalls or the perimeter, right? It is about what an individual can do and what an individual account can do.
So I would say the aha moment actually happened before I transitioned into cyber, because as part of one of my other roles in between QA and becoming fully into cyber, there were those moments where you get so caught up in validating the business requirements that you forget about the user. And the concern is you focus more on the user from a customer perspective, not the users that are required on the back end of the systems. And so that's where the aha moment came in, when we actually found someone that should not have been able to make changes in the system was able to. And the aha moment was they were able to, as part of being grandfathered into a group.
Hmm.
And so that was my first real experience of peeling back the onion to understand, if you will, or the layers of the onion to understand how it happened, what can we do to prevent it, and then understanding that there was a whole function that actually supported that scenario, which led me to identity and access
So
management.
when we talk about identity, right, and kind of operationalizing identity and operationalizing ownership, I know that that's a big focus for you and what you do over at JetBlue. How do you operationalize identity in a way that sticks, right, across the business unit, across all the teams that you need to work with in order to kind of make this whole thing work?
So I think it's multifaceted. So I will tell you my journey, because from conversations with my peers, everybody has a different journey. Uh, for me, it was first educating and empowering leadership to understand the scope and what it would take to help us make a robust, or have a robust identity program. Once you have their buy-in, it makes it a little bit easier to drive the changes that are needed, whether that's through conducting more user access reviews, or putting in additional controls, uh, just driving the overall change. Then it became, how do you empower the people that actually have to do the reviews, right? Um, when you have 7 or 8 people to review, it's easy. When you start talking about hundreds, maybe even thousands, and then you have the variation between what I would call an employee versus a contractor, it just further magnifies the scope of responsibility and time that's involved. So part of that was partnering with the right business partner, if you will. So at JetBlue, we call contractors and vendors business partners. So forgive me
Hmm.
if I go back and forth between the terminology.
Hmm.
Um, partnering with the right business partner so that you have a tool that will help you. Automation is also key as much as possible. Um, and in that particular instance, we did choose to partner with Sphere Board to help us in, not only communicating what's involved, but streamlining the process so that the reviewers will be more open to join the journey with us. And so, like, at a very high level, those are the things that we did to help improve. Um, since that has occurred, it's been easier to leverage identity in other aspects. So, as far as, confirming ownership or access to sensitive data, confirming ownership to our SharePoint sites. So, when you think of identity, I would say a novice person would say, okay, well, that's my name, PII information, if you will. But it actually spans more than that. It's really around who has access to that particular asset and what's the risk associated with having access to that asset.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know we did a case study with you guys, and your use of the product is, I want to say it's unique. It's not really unique. I mean, it's what the product was designed to do, but you guys kind of went in wholeheartedly, right? You weren't using it just for one feature or one capability. You kind of dove in, and I feel like, and I have to attribute it mostly to you, right? And kind of driving it because, we find that sometimes, someone will, and it doesn't even have to be Sphere, right? It doesn't have to be Sphere board, but so, we find companies will buy a product, and it's almost like it becomes a silo. You own this product, and then you have to push everyone to use it. Whereas I feel like with JetBlue, it feels like everyone, and maybe it is at that leadership level, right? Because you started at the leadership, everyone kind of embraces it and says, okay, yeah, we bought this, we spent money on it, it's meant to help us. Let's actually use it to help us. And doesn't seem to be a lot of kind of infighting. Oh no, I want to protect my little world, and this person wants to protect their little world. Do you think that comes from you getting buy-in from kind of senior leadership, and kind of having that adoption be smoother than what I've personally seen at other organizations?
I think it's twofold. So, one is definitely having leadership buy-in. The other thing I would say is picking a tool that makes it easy for the user. So, having leadership buy-in definitely helped. But if the tool itself was complicated or it wasn't user friendly or we didn't provide the um, I'm going to say office hours, if you will, the additional support for the users to become comfortable with the tool, then I don't think we would have been as successful. I would just caveat, we actually had a, let's just say, C suite leader who had to do a review using the tool. And, and we were on pins and needles, like, okay, what is this going to work out? And the feedback was awesome. That's it. That's it. That's all I have to do. And I was like, yeah, that's it. It's simple, right? And she's like, oh, great. We're gonna move forward. It was like that's all we needed to really just like expand it.
Yeah, and that's I always say that the thing that'll make or break a new relationship is when you first go away together, right? Because you're living the whole time,
Yeah.
and something like that could be a relationship killer, right? That's a C-level person
So yes.
testing the tool, that could have been very yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about and I think right now we're not just talking about human identities. We are talking about human and non-human identities. When we talk about non-human identities and the explosive growth of non-human identities, whether it's service accounts or all the other ways that applications and scripts and everything is authenticating, how do you think about non-human identities? Do you think about them in terms of how to protect them in the same bucket as human identities, or do you think about them a little bit different?
So we look at them a little bit different because you have a lot more flexibility around the controls that you can set, right? And you can contain them a lot easier than you can a human, if you will, right? Um, there's more facets that will impact a human and changes that can occur. Um, life changes. You get a child, you get married, you get divorced, multiple things could happen. You go on a leave of absence. Whereas with the non human accounts, they're pretty structured and they have less rigor, if you will, where you can drive setting the controls around them. Um, the challenge comes in when you don't have complete visibility to what the impact is. So, for example, if you have service accounts, but you're not clear on what that service account actually touches or what's its purpose or who owns it. And if the owner doesn't know that information, then it becomes a little bit more of a challenge. So I think the first step, again, is very high level, understanding what is the identity of that non human account. What's its purpose? What does it have access to? Before you look to set the controls or the guardrails around it.
Yeah, and ownership is just so important in kind of the whole functioning of how do you go from here's all the stuff that's wrong to how to actually fix it. And it's interesting that more and more we're seeing ownership kind of be elevated to be more than just a piece of metadata. Oh, I know Angie owns this account. More like, well, if I have an account that is not doesn't have an owner or is orphaned, that should be considered as serious as a credential where the password hasn't changed in 5 years, right? Because it is your bridge to that remediation, right?
Completely agreed. Completely agreed.
So, along with ownership, what are some of the other metrics that you really care about when it comes to managing identities, whether it's human or non-human? What are the we just talked about ownership, but what are some of the other ones that are really important for you that signal that the environment is in a healthy state without giving away any proprietary info, of course, but anything some kind of high level things that will signal to you, yeah, we're in a healthy state, or actually, if this gets worse, we're in an unhealthy state.
So I think it depends again on each organization, but I would say at a high level, it's uh, setting the controls that are meaningful to you for what you understand about your environment, right? So, um, examples, password changes. If you're in a passwordless environment, what does that mean for the non human accounts, right? Are you putting some type of random calculator that will generate the passwords, and how does that impact the products that they support? Um, how does that service account get provisioned and or deprovisioned, right? What's the management around that process, or governance, if you will, around that process? And that goes to both human and non-human accounts. Uh, so other things that I would think about, is that service account or that human account part of a group, and what's the provisioning that or the privileges that are associated to that group, and how do you govern the nesting of that group? Like, do you put controls in place so that you only have 3 layers of nesting? I mean, could you imagine if you had 18 layers of nesting? Then just managing that level of detail in itself could take you 6 months to a year, depending on how many people are involved. Um, and then it's also, how do you manage what I would say admin accounts for individuals that have a primary account and an admin account? Is that the route
Mhm.
that you want to take? Do you want to leverage just in time? Can your environment support just in time provisioning? What are the controls that you're going to put in place to ensure that the just in time privileges are removed when that time has expired? It's, you know, when an account is created, what are the credentials that you need to make sure you capture so that when you have to go back and do user access reviews, or you have to go and evaluate whether an account has the proper ownership, do you automatically default it to the person that the account is being set up for? And how do you distinguish between a employee and a contractor? What's the mechanisms that you're going to put in place again, or the controls, the processes? What standards are you going to set? Is there a distinction between the two? And how do you track the activities or the transactions for those individuals, as it varies based on each application, right? So
Hmm.
it depends on what magnitude you want to cover, whether it's on an application level, whether it's on a server level, whether it's on a department level. There may be instances where you may not want to track it for every department, but there's certain departments like your customer support, your and I'm talking aviation right now, obviously, but your HR, your mechanics, if you will, right? Um, I think you may need to put different controls in place to track based on the risk associated with the type of account.
Yeah, and when we talk about groups and AD groups, it's just groups, especially AD and Entra ID. It's just so critical to managing identities, and I feel like a lot of people. It's not that they ignore groups, but they almost think of groups as just kind of a side thing when groups and provisioning, given that a lot of provisioning, most provisioning is done at the group level, you kind of have to start there, right? You kind of have to start with AD and kind of work your way out. Or do you think that you have to?
I think you need to take the time to clean up the foundation, right? Because anything you build upon that is only going to further expand on the amount of complexity, right? As well as it just it makes the mess messier and more to manage. And then when you have to go back and clean it up, you're not just cleaning up the foundation, but now you have to clean everything that was built upon that foundation. So I would definitely encourage anyone to start at that fundamental level. Uh, and even if it's just a matter of understanding who owns each type of account, because at least then you have someone that you can go to that's accountable for any controls that you're going to implement. You'll have someone that if you implemented something and it went wrong, you have that contact on how to, address it, whatever it may be, right? It may very well be just rolling it back. It may be putting additional controls in place specific to that particular account. But you don't know that if you don't have that insight as to who owns it and what the impact would be.
Yeah, and it is very much an ongoing thing, right? This is not something that you do a program for 6 months or a year and it's done. This is a identity hygiene is a forever activity, unfortunately, because of the constantly changing
That keeps
dynamic.
us employed.
Well, yes, that too. That's a positive. That's the plus side. But I think a lot of times people think, oh, I have a mess and I clean the mess and it goes away. Well, I mean, you make your bed in the morning, but if you're gonna sleep in that bed the next day, you're gonna have to make the bed again, right? You can't expect that. Again, yes, you can do make your bed one time. You just can never use the bed again, right? You can never sleep in it again. But that idea of that continuous, it is a forever program. Um, did you have a hard time making people who are not in identity, who let's say your business users who have to do certify the campaigns and certify account access and ownership and everything else? Did you have to explain that to them? It's like, I'm coming to you now, but keep in mind that I will be coming to you again and probably again because this is not a one-time activity.
So, luckily for us, this was an activity that was done at least annually, specifically for our SOX applications. And there were a handful of other products that leverage user access reviews. So for those, it wasn't hard because they were used to doing it and having a tool that made their life easier. They were quick to embrace it. It was really more for the applications or those that did not conduct the user access reviews. And again, the feedback that we received was so positive that, you know, they say word of mouth is your best advertisement.
Mm-hmm.
It actually worked, to the point where we specifically have received quite a few requests to incorporate more applications into our user access review process. Uh, and so I'm targeting, hopefully by the end of next year, middle of next year, we will have, I don't want to say all because there's always something new that creeps up, but
Mm-hmm.
I would say at least 95% of our applications we will have user access reviews for. So obviously you target your tier ones and your SOX applications first. But we are looking to cover, I would say, at least 90 to 95% of our applications by next year.
That's awesome. So when we talk about some of the things that are coming, obviously everyone's talking about AI and AI agents. How are you thinking about kind of that future state of identity in the context of AI? And are you starting to look at ways that you can potentially track down, manage these AI agents that are going to be popping up everywhere?
So the short answer is yes, we are looking at what AI can potentially do for us. Uh, there's a longer answer, which starts with the first question is, are we ready to embrace AI based on where we currently stand? Um, and I would say if your foundation is not cleansed, anything you add on top of it is not going to give you the biggest return because you're operating on, I don't want to say garbage, but you're operating with a mess, right? So for me, it's really focusing on making sure we have our foundation in order before we look to leverage AI on top of a mess, if you will, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, AI is going to leverage the data that you have. And if your data isn't clean, with all the brilliance of AI, it's only going to be as effective as the data that it's consuming. So I have not come to a point where I would say, oh, yes, and this is what we're going to do with AI, because there's still a lot of fundamental work, in my view, that has to be done before we could really carve out a true AI path.
Yeah, I guess if you human identities and machine identities are you don't have control over those if you haven't done the basics of just fully understanding all your human and non-human accounts and the reality is at least most of the customers I talk to, they haven't, right? It's the reason why, as you said, the reason why we're in business. But it's a hard problem to solve, right? It's also not a simple thing. You can't just flip a switch and now you're managing all of your identities. But if you haven't done, forget about the machine identities. If you haven't even fully embraced the proper management of human identities, you're not ready to even think about how are you going to manage AI identities. I think the thing that worries me is the fact that you have all these vendors that are rushing to build AI into their product, that these things are going to pop up and security people might be caught off guard, like, oh wait, you're using an AI agent in this application that's like a marketing application. Where did this come from? What is this?
So I would venture to say I think the topic of AI warrants its own conversation, because I have my own opinions about overall AI and how people are claiming to incorporate AI into their tools. Uh, what I would say is before you jump on the bandwagon of saying, oh, my tool has I would question what's behind their AI, right? Is it machine learning? Is it just high level, or I would say more detailed automation leveraging machine learning? Um, and so I'm not the one to say I'm on the AI bandwagon across the board. I think there are pockets where it has been properly vetted, and it's definitely a plus. As it pertains to identity, I have not seen a tool that I would be willing to jump and embrace right away. Not that there aren't pockets or aspects of tools that I would say, okay, yeah, this portion makes sense, but the rest of it, I'm not 100% on board yet. Like, you got to show me a little bit more. Um, Specific to our partnership, I think where it's a little different is because we're heavily involved and we're working close together so that it makes it easier to understand what you're building along the way because you're taking me for the ride with you, as opposed to going to a completely new vendor and trusting that what they say they have is AI is really all of AI.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on is that we don't build for the sake of building. We build because someone actually has a need for it. We don't do reporting for the sake of reporting. We do reporting because there's value in that report. And value ultimately comes down to action, right? If I can give you a really great looking report, but in that report you don't have a way to reduce risk, what's the point? What's the point of it's reporting for the sake of reporting? Um, so if you had to, if you had a crystal ball and you could look at the future 5, 10 years from now, and you had to think about, okay, what does identity security look like, um, whether it's for JetBlue or just in general? Um, I'm not going to ask you to predict because this things are changing so much. What do you want? 5 to 10 years from now, what do you want identity security to look like? Not just for JetBlue, but I'm saying in general for the industry.
I'd like to have it a little bit more seamless where there's less dependency on having to um, impact the operation, if you will, right? The business owners. The current process, I don't believe, gives room for leveraging all the information that's available to us to minimize the impact on the business owner. Um, so whether that's incorporating AI, having more robust tools, it may very well even be a combination of all, as well as, maybe setting more controls or having the flexibility to set more controls. Um, there's a notion of, when it comes to the human accounts, leveraging biometrics where you can, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but I'm just not 100%. Like, I don't see the full picture there, right? Um, I see it for authentication, but for confirming access, I don't know. I don't see it. But I think we could do a lot better with making it more seamless and less dependent on having to ask someone else to conduct the reviews.
Awesome. So Angie, we reached the part of the podcast where we always do some very serious technology and security and identity questions, and then we have the fun question at the end, the not work related. Now, I know for a fact, and you and I have had this conversation. You are practically the brand ambassador for Disney Cruises. I mean, I've not only have you told me that I should go on a Disney cruise multiple times, but I've heard you tell other people at least 10 times that they should be going on a Disney cruise. That is like the best vacation, which I never honestly until you and I had the conversation, I would have never thought that that was something that I'd want to do. But you definitely have sold it to me. So here's my question: if you could bring any Disney character to life as your travel buddy for your next Disney cruise, which Disney character would you bring to life, and why? And why would they be a good character to bring with you? And for our audience, I did not give Angie this question on purpose. So because of that, just to make it fair, you could take as much time as you want. We'll cut out the thinking time
Oh my
in
gosh.
post.
There's
So
so many
any character.
Disney characters. I want all of them.
I mean, all right. So you
Um,
could pick 2 or 3 if you'd like, but you have to tell me why you'd pick that character.
See, now I'm drawing a blank and it's not fair. Um, and I'm trying to remember one of the princesses. I want to say Ariel, but I'm not sure. Uh, the Little Mermaid.
Yeah, I believe that's Ariel. Yeah.
Okay, and the reason for that is because I would love to be an avid swimmer,
Mm.
and I am far from that. um, but in addition to that, I think there is a mark of courage
Hmm.
as well as um, the sign of being inquisitive, like daring in
Hmm.
her own regard, which are traits that I relate to. Right. Every now and again, you do have to step out of your comfort zone to grow.
Hmm.
Um,
She literally
and
stepped out of the water.
she stepped
I
way
mean,
out,
that's
right?
way out of comfort zone, right? She had to learn how to walk, right?
But I would say for those 3 traits, that would be one. Definitely the swimming. It's like I could swim, but I can't. I'm not a swimmer. Um,
Right. And you are on a cruise for the vacation, so you're surrounded by water, so that makes sense.
That's fine, but I know how to stay close to the life vest and the rings. I make sure that
Yeah.
I scope it all out. Um, but yes, I would say her. I mean, there's quite a few others, but I think those are the 3 traits that stand out for me. Um, being willing to take a chance to fulfill your own curiosity, and also being humble enough to know that you made a mistake and understand it and respect it.
It's like we tied the whole thing together. We started the conversation where you started in QA, you stepped out of your comfort zone and went into the security world, almost like Ariel stepping out of the water and going into the dry land,
Land.
and yeah, we tied it all together. So that we didn't even plan it, we didn't even rehearse,
There you go.
and it was perfect. So Angie, this was fantastic. Definitely, I would love to have you back if you're willing to come back. These were great insights, and thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us today.
By all means, have a great evening.
Thanks, Angie.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Smells Like Identity Hygiene. Smells Like Identity Hygiene is a production of Sphere Technology Solutions, and our producer is Matthew Clay. Until next time.